Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sagar and Jetty with my colleague Kevin Daly. Alternative Facts, episode 16, a historic run.
I'm sorry we missed you last week.
Yeah, Kevin was sick, unfortunately, but
strep.
we're back. We're back. We're better than ever. Before we go, I want to remind everybody, please check in. Not enough of you are checking in. We need to know your location.
Mm-hmm.
We need you to be as specific as possible.
And you know, if you move after you initially check in, please update us.
If you're a Tennessee deplorable and you become a Texas deplorable, I need to know that.
I need it.
That's very important. But so, let's start off with the alternative facts this week. Let's look at some of the media narratives that need to be dissected. Kevin, we're going to start with Vanity Fair, which will literally run anything.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, it was a pretty. There was a pretty unbelievable piece we want to talk a little bit about. It had a variety of pretty outlandish claims about President Trump and the mood inside the West Wing. But what was most alarming to me is that it seems that the piece is not sourced very well. In fact, I think that this story is really only running on the strength of the writer's byline. The writer is a guy named Gabe Sherman. He's a very fine journalist, and he had a really excellent series about the ongoing allegations of sexual harassment at Fox News. He was breaking news left and right on that front. A lot of news that people didn't think was really substantiated or going to be corroborated in the long run, but it turns out that everything he had reported on was quite true. So he has a little bit of credibility with the press because of this. And so I think for that reason, he can get away with sourcing that maybe isn't as strong as we would like it to be. But wow, there were some really outrageous claims in the piece that seemed to me ill-informed.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst and most irresponsible ones is that the report was, according to a former official, I mean, the attribution on this.
It was like a former Republican official.
A former Republican official, something like that. That President Trump, if he were to ever reach for the nuclear football, that Secretary of Defense Mattis and Chief of Staff John Kelly would literally tackle him in the act.
Yeah.
This is irresponsible.
Right.
This is so irresponsible. To publish something like that off the word of some so-called former Republican official, cast doubt amongst U.S. allies about the stability of the president based on literal garbage reporting.
Yeah, I mean, it is by the copy's own admission, it is speculation from a source outside the administration. It's the sort of thing that we at the Daily Caller News Foundation would not run. Like,
never,
if I went
absolutely
with a quote,
never.
If I went to my editor with a quote like that, I would get shot down.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the only reason this got by the copy desk was because Gabe Sherman has a little bit of social capital right now,
and because they hate Trump. Let's be real here.
And because they don't like the president, and you're right, and they want to run with anything that will
the tweet that should be up there is a really good one. In that, a lot of people who really didn't like Trump, they chuckled at it, but it's not journalism. And like I said, it is so dangerous and irresponsible in order to perpetuate these myths about, some sort of, I mean, the Secretary of Defense and the Chief of Staff are Marines. I'm like, do we live in a military junta country in which they are the ones who decide nuclear force? This is insane.
And they also were some general claims about how, the president is losing a step, that his mental state is deteriorating, that the mood in the West Wing is like, the Führer bunker in the final weeks as the Russians are closing in on Berlin, right? And even those claims were not sourced to anybody in the administration.
Absolutely
they were sourced to, Republicans, in the Capitol or to like friends of Trump. And don't get me wrong, we know that Trump talks to outside advisors frequently, but nobody in the White House, nobody who's with the president on a day-to-day basis, right? This isn't good sourcing, and yet, it seems to me that our standards of ethics and our best practices are deteriorating just because most of us don't like Trump.
Absolutely. So, and General Kelly, Chief of Staff Kelly, appeared before the White House press corps today, and he told them, he said, guys, you guys need to get better sources. Going to some low-level dude and citing him as a senior White House official or senior administration official, that's just not going to cut it. And it gives everybody at home the false perception of this insane cloud amongst the West Wing. I have read that story 25 times since Trump has become president. I read it 1,000,000 times during the campaign.
That was my first thought.
The dark mood of Trump Tower.
Right.
He comes out and he's like, everything's fine. I mean, it's like it's wishful thinking. It's a media narrative shaping echo chamber in which if they say there's chaos inside the West Wing, they are hoping for a self-reinforcing feedback loop, which gives them even more stuff to write about.
Sure, and I'd say two things in connection with that. The first thing is, whenever you're reading stories, in the press generally, you need to be conscious of their sourcing.
Exactly.
Who are they attributing their information to? You need to judge the veracity of the information that you're reading on that basis.
Right.
And then secondly, we have seen firsthand how even good sourcing can produce different lines of reportage. So, for example, remember that Anthony Scaramucci guy?
Yeah.
Who was he was communications director for 10 days? So Jonathan Swan over at Axios broke the news that Scaramucci was probably going to be the new communications director. Hunter Walker, who's another White House reporter, tweets, "I just talked to a White House source, and he says that Scaramucci hasn't even interviewed for the job." And Swan responds more or less, "Well, I got my information directly from the president. So I think that my sourcing is better than yours." But it just goes to show that any White House reporter can go to any low-level White House source, get a quote, and then shop it all over town as major news.
There's hundreds.
And it doesn't even have to be accurate.
There are hundreds of people who work in the White House. Each person that you know their name, there are 300 people who work for that person. A source close to Kelly could be the guy who literally picked up his dry cleaning and dropped it off.
Right.
That's the fact of it here, folks. It's like that they shop these quotes around in the hope of building a narrative and to reinforce their own perceptions of the president and of this White House.
And what do we know as reporters too?
Yeah,
the people who are most eager to talk are the people who don't have that much information.
Or they have an axe to grind.
Or they have an axe to grind. We encounter this all the time.
You should see my inbox of people who are trying to push stories, push narratives, people who report things based on these types of sources are almost always getting them out there, not because the information doesn't want to be out there.
And
that's the key.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a look at the other side of sourcing.
Yeah.
At NBC in the context of this Harvey Weinstein story.
Yeah. So let's get it. So as you guys have heard, Harvey Weinstein, legendary Hollywood producer, total sexual predator, pervert, possible rapist. It's an open secret in Hollywood for years. We've seen clips now of Seth MacFarlane joking about it in the 2013
at the Oscars.
I think it was
at the
Oscar
and
the Emmys.
It was the Emmy announcement for the Oscar. Something.
Some disgusting dilettante show.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Quite right. And everybody laughed.
Yeah, everybody laughed.
Hundreds of people
everybody
laughed.
Knew. 30 Rock made a joke about it. Everybody's making jokes about it. Nobody said a damn thing. The New York Times reportedly had the story back in 2004. It was quashed for sourcing reasons. The Ronan Farrow wrote an explosive piece for The New Yorker in which he detailed several rape allegations against Harvey Weinstein, including audio obtained from the NYPD, which shows him being, I'm not going to curse here, being a freaking creep. Okay?
Right.
Groping a woman, trying to get her to come
admitting to a sexual misdemeanor.
Yeah, admitting to a sexual misdemeanor on a tape. So Ronan Farrow works for NBC. Why didn't that story run there?
Well, he went on Rachel Maddow's program on MSNBC to discuss that very point. She asked him this question, and I think he answered it as professionally as he could.
He
NBC is his employer. He doesn't want to speak too ill of his employer, but he, in a roundabout way, said, I had this story, I presented it to my bosses at NBC, and Harvey Weinstein is a powerful man, and Harvey Weinstein had wind of the story, and he leveraged a lot of pressure against my bosses at NBC. And
personally threatened him with a lawsuit.
He personally threatened me with a lawsuit, and he also brought a lot of pressure to bear on my bosses, and they didn't want to run it. They decided to sit on it, and so he took the story over to the New Yorker, who actually had the guts to run this story. And we should send kudos over to our colleagues at the New Yorker for having the strength of their convictions to run the story.
The tweet that you guys should see up on your screen details how high-level NBC executives were involved in this story, all the way up to the CEO and the chiefs. And so it doesn't take a genius to figure out that NBC has some interest in Hollywood and with the Weinstein Company and with Miramax Film.
NBC Universal.
And NBC Universal, which happens to make movies. This is a pervasive culture of sexual abuse within Hollywood that is quashed by corporate interests, which has its own hands in the DC media.
Right,
Here.
exactly.
Yeah.
People need to understand how incestuous the relationship is between DC and New York media and
Hollywood.
And Hollywood, right? So, Hollywood movie houses like Weinstein's company routinely want to option the long-form magazine stories that we read in places like Condé Nast or The New Yorker, right?
Exactly.
Every journalist who's working on a long-term story wants their story to be a movie one day, and they hope that their story is going to get optioned by, some big production house or going to get noticed by some big director and producer like Harvey Weinstein. And so, because these journalists are pursuing that kind of acclaim, and because magazine editors and corporate officers want their journalism to gain that kind of attention, they're going to cover for a man like Harvey Weinstein, who can leverage his connections to make a lot of money for them, which is to say nothing of the fact that these people socialize with one another on a regular basis, and they also have overlapping business interests. And so there are all of these powerful men in media, in production houses, and in journalism in all three of these cities who will cover for each other because they work in these codependent spheres.
Exactly. They're literally codependent. I mean, Time Warner Inc. owns CNN, NBC Universal, NBC News,
right.
Walt Disney Corporation, ABC News.
Right.
It's a feedback. I mean, it's something that you have to understand here is that the pressure doesn't just come outright, and it's exactly how this NBC story unfolded, is that they didn't just come and say, no, we can't talk about Harvey Weinstein. They're like, oh, let's take a look at the sources. I don't really think that you have anything there. It's a soft pressure to keep business and the bottom line running as usual.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and the line is never, we need to cover for our friend Harvey. The line is, well, the bosses at NBC Universal aren't going to like this. This is going to be bad for business. Right.
Make sure you got it right. Like, oh, I don't really think you've got anything there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. It's never explicit. It's
Exactly.
always couched in these kinds of implicit sorts of criticisms. And what was most remarkable is that Farrow told Maddow that he had the story almost nailed down.
Yeah.
When he went to NBC, I had people on the record. I think he had the audio.
He had a video. He was going to interview one of the victims on video, and they quashed the
And I think he had the audio from the NYPD
where
where Weinstein is admitting to this sexual misdemeanor. And they had the gall to tell him that he didn't have the story run down yet. It's unbelievable.
That's how you guys need to understand here, is that NBC quashed this story because they were afraid of pissing off Harvey Weinstein. They covered up for a sexual predator, and it's disgusting.
And this is why this is a political problem for Democrats.
Yes.
Because these corporations and these groups of people that we're talking about are a powerful fundraising constituency of the Democratic Party. And so, it's not like Democratic politicians are covering up for these people, because that's just not the case. But these are the people who Democratic politicians go to get a little bit of cultural cachet and a whole lot of money. Yeah. And so to stand so close to a crowd that is so protective of its own and that is so tolerant of the worst kinds of sexual predations is a huge political problem for Democrats. And I would close by saying that this story, in light of that, never would have come out if Hillary Clinton had been elected president.
That is absolutely 100% correct, and that's very important for all of you to keep in mind. So thank you for joining us, episode 16 of Alternative Facts. Sagar and Jetty, Kevin Daly at the Daily Caller News Foundation. I hope you enjoyed it. Join us next week and check in. I need more check-ins.
Have a good weekend.